Well, it is a special treat. Ivan Gutfriend joins us here in the bunker. Am I right, Ive? In 38 years with the green and white?
38 years.
Wow, that's a lot. You saw a lot of guys come and go.
Yes, I did. And also, I spent 8 years with Sandy prior to that. So from 1970 till 2015, I guess that's a little bit of time.
I'm not good at math, Abu. You are. How many years is that?
A lot.
46 years.
Yeah.
Wow, a half a century with this club.
Yes.
Well, you look fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Life is good.
I feel good, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
That's
believe
good.
it or not.
Oh, I don't doubt that for a second. Although, Abu, did he not seem cranky a lot of the time? Or is that just me?
If you had to deal with me, you'd, I would think he was the opposite of cranky, given everything that was going on.
Yeah,
but definitely on the cranky radar.
I'm teasing you, of course. But
I've had my cranky moments, so there's no question.
Yeah. Well, hey, what do you remember about Mike Abu-Meshrik in those illustrious 2 years? I mean, you guys spent some good time together, you two.
Well, the funny thing is that I remember the 1 year, I believe it was 2007, that Mike used to always go down. I said, good grief, I used to spend more time running back and forth. I put in more yards than our running back that year. So, anyways.
What answer did you get?
I'm fragile.
Not much. He was fine.
I'm like a Lamborghini, like you don't just take it out of the garage. You got to make sure it's running well.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time on the field just going back and forth for this guy.
Pigeon, didn't they call it?
Yes.
That's what. That's the designated go down guy for all those that know.
Yeah, I was really good at it.
You're from Leader, Saskatchewan. You're a provincial treasure and an icon of the franchise, and you're very, which I say public. I saw you walking around Wascana Lake last week. That's when I said we got to get Ivan in on the show. So people know who you are because you're on TV every week for 40 some years. What's the question you get the most from Rider fans when they see you?
Oh, goodness. That's a good question. I really don't. Well, a lot of times I get the question, what's the most common injury? And
really?
Those kinds. Yeah, believe it or not. And, I mean, sometimes I think they think that, something really horrific happens all the time. But your hamstrings are your most common problems, an ankle sprain, those kinds of things. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. But I know people, people are expecting me to say something grandiose like a fractured femur or an ACL every other day. But those things don't happen. They happen often enough, but they don't happen as much as people think they do.
Well, the question I thought you might have got, because you've got 3 rings, right? Is what's your favorite Grey Cup championship? 89, 07, and 2013. Do you ever get that one?
07, because it was the best one.
Well, yes, I have been asked that question, but I have to say the 89. Matter of fact, I still remember Terry Jones asking for a comment after the 89 Grey Cup when we were in Toronto, and obviously when you've gone through 11 years of not making the playoffs. And finally, to get to that pinnacle where you win the Grey Cup, just that alone was very gratifying. They're all important. They're all great. And as a matter of fact, the thing that bothers me the most, believe it or not, was the 2009 Grey Cup, the one that we lost. Of course, that is one that's just etched in my mind to this day. And so. It took a long time for me to get over that one, but that was a game what we should have won, and we didn't win. But 89, I have to say, was obviously it was the first one, and there was a long drought at that point.
Abu, you jump in anytime if you got something for Jive and Ivan here.
Well,
because I could go on all day.
I've been in circles with Ivan where there's not cameras around, and he's answered some questions of his career, or Poli and all day can throw in some stories too. And I don't think those really appropriate to ask what I really want to ask. But how hard is it to? Because you've worked with literally tens of thousands of players, and I imagine one of the hardest things to do is decipher whether a guy's got a broken leg or a boo-boo. Yeah. Because the acute pain isn't always, like when a guy's rolling around on the floor, it's usually not a severe injury, where it's the other way around.
Right. It's what was his name? Sean from the 2009 team.
Sean Lucas?
Sean Lucas. I remember,
number 31.
Yeah, number 31, Sean Lucas. I remember Lance Fraser. They were two very good friends. But I remember Sean Lucas. I can remember I went out onto the field, and oh my goodness, I thought he had broken something. broken his arm, his elbow, or whatever it was. I mean, he was just ranting and raving. And anyways, he came off to the sideline and started moving it around, and he was back in for the next play. But I thought that he broke his arm. The way he was acting and flailing on the field.
So do you when it's a DB down versus, I don't know, say an offensive lineman, do you kind of say, all right, if we ask him what his pain is, if he says an 8, then
Well, the thing is that you have to let the person settle down. Sometimes they overreact. Sometimes they think it's worse than it actually is, and so you have to have some kind of a calm demeanor with them, just to let them settle down and just, ask some pertinent questions, and then you have to reassure them that no, it's not this, it's not that, or whatever. So, a lot of times, surprisingly enough, as I'm running onto the field, I have a pretty good idea of what the problem is, at least by the way they're grimacing or grabbing for a body part. And so you have to sort of, think about the mechanism of injury as you're going out there. And so you have a pretty fair idea of what is wrong.
Ivan Gutfriend with us, 46 years. I thought it was 38. Wow.
38 full-time.
Well, no, 40, we'll say 46 with the Riders. Questions are coming in from the Facebook feed, and it's come from a few. Mike in Fort McMurray, Alberta, says this morning, I'm curious what Ivan thinks should happen with Zach Collaros. We've heard what players think, but it'd be interesting to get his opinion. Somebody else just asked Ivan's thoughts on the Zach Collaros situation. I'll just leave it there. What do you think? You're following it.
I've been asked that question a fair amount, to be quite honest, just from people. And one of the things that I had, obviously you take courses in the off season, and so I've taken a few concussion courses, and that seems to be a big, obviously that's a big deal. And I know one of the points that as a matter of fact, I just threw those notes out the other day. One of the points that I remember from a conference prior was that any player that has had 3 concussions the previous year are 3 times more likely to get one the following year. And so, Zach has had, I'm going to say, probably in the vicinity of 4 or 5 concussions that we are aware of. And so, to me, that does not bode well for his health. And so, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm sure, obviously, he's here for this year. My opinion is that of Fajardo.
Oh, Fajardo, yeah.
If Fajardo continues to play the way he is, I think he might just be an emergency. I don't want to be a coach, but but I think that's where he's going to be at, and they're going to need him at some point this year. But I think for the sake of his health, I think that he has to sit down with his family and really, think about what he's going to do after this year.
But what's the ruling? But I get it. He's a player, and once he's deemed fit after the 6th game, the Riders can release him and not be responsible for his salary. Well, I don't think they would, or they should, but could they not? Or they're opening themselves for a lawsuit, though, if they do. But they could, no?
Yeah, that's true. But it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard from a medical point of view to give him that kind of a clearance, having suffered as many concussions as he has. Do you do that? I don't know. I don't think they will.
No,
but I know what you're saying, and obviously that's happened in the past where players become healthy and boom, they're gone.
You got you
and
on
the
tape,
thing is
you're
just
healthy.
that, and this guy is a veteran. And so, a 5-year veteran, unless they've changed the rules. I mean, after the 9th game, which is usually about Labor Day or the Banjo Bowl, that's when you're locked in as far as a veteran not being able to be released. I don't think they'll do that. I think he can still play, and I think they'll probably need him at some point down the stretch.
Mm-hmm. One thing that's changed, Ivan, I mean, I grew up here listening to you do the interviews with Jeff Currier from the trainer's room. We're going way back into the 80s, and then we continued that when I took over in 99. I don't think coaches would allow that interview anymore. You know how things have changed? So you used to detail all the injuries, and now they don't want to talk about them.
No, they don't. And, it's you're right. The thing is, this is that you can't, one of the things I learned with all the coaches that I've gone through is that you can't really tell them what to do or who to, or who's health, or I shouldn't say who's healthy, but what you do with the player once they're healthy or not. All you have to do is give them the information and let them decide for themselves what they want to do. Because all you do is give them the information and they can decide whether it's in the best interest of the player to continue playing or not. Mm-hmm. So, that's one thing I learned.
But how or why did it become so secretive? I would just say over the last 10 years, it's not just here. Yeah. It's the entire sport of pro football.
I don't know, but at the same time, I know what you're saying. It's a lower body injury. It's an upper body injury.
If they say that at all.
If they say that at all.
Yeah.
I don't know. Obviously, they're always concerned about, playing their next opponent. They don't want to give something away that a player is healthy or not healthy or whatever. But, at the same time, just this past week with Mazzoli, as soon as he went down, I looked at my daughter and I said, I think he tore his ACL. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, you can pretty well tell when a person goes down and grabs his knee and is in breathing and pain, exactly what's happened. But, people are they came out right away and said that he's done for the season. So, you're right, though. It seems like they're swinging the other way again.
Yeah, exactly. But you remember when Field Turf came in, Ivan. This is your life. Field Turf was supposed to prevent these things.
Well, it doesn't. It's interesting that when we went from the Omni turf or the tartan turf or whatever you want to call the turf that we had before, which was as hard as a rock, Field Turf was coming in, and so we were in the process of getting a new surface, and AstroTurf was the only other option. Right. But you know what? I phoned a lot of the Big 12 teams in the States in the conference. And I phoned a lot of the, about 4 or 5 NFL teams, and at that time the feedback I got from them, they weren't convinced that Field Turf was the option, was the way to go. I was quite shocked at that. So, anyways, obviously I gave that information to the people involved, and so they decided to take on AstroTurf, but AstroTurf didn't last 5 years, and we went right to Field Turf. So. Obviously, at that point, it was just relatively new. We were in need of a new turf, and so what do? Do you go with a proven product, or do you try something new? And so that's why we went to AstroTurf, or that's why they decided to go to AstroTurf versus Field Turf. But that didn't take it took less than 4 or 5 years for them to switch over to Field Turf because there was more data based on Field Turf being safer.
Ivan Gutfriend's got to roll before too long at the top of the hour, so if you got questions for him, let us know. Blake writes in from Kindersley this morning. Ivy says, out of all the coaches, who was your favorite / best to work with?
There was a few of those, but I have to say that Ken Miller, obviously I had him speak for me at the Plaza of Honor, and he was a very good person to work with. There was a lot of good people to work with, but he was probably, if you will, the best person to work with that I've ever had as a coach. I've had a few bad ones, or not bad ones, but I've had a few difficult ones. Mm-hmm. But Ken Miller, I must say, was a pretty good person to work for.
Why?
Well, he understand what our role was, and he took all our medical information and used it to at his leisure. So he did weigh in on our answers from our medical staff, and so he always listened. And I'm not saying that he always took that advice, but he was always low key. He was always even keeled. He never got excited, never got mad. We just gave him the information, and he just ran with it. Was Don Matthews? Are you one of the guys that loved Don Matthews? Because most of the guys I know that worked with him did love him. Are you in that camp? Well, I wouldn't say I loved him, but Don Matthews wasn't as difficult to work with as people think. He used. I would give him information, and he would say, "Okay, yes, fine," and he would go on with that. But he wasn't a difficult person to work with. As a matter of fact, I enjoyed working with him. There's other people that were far less far less willing to work with me. For example, like Jack Goda was a tough cookie, and you couldn't do anything. I mean, you couldn't say anything bad about the guy because he was a coach of the year in the CFL and the USFL. So I mean, obviously
He knew what he was doing.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing, but he was a tough guy to work for.
He's my step uncle, by the way.
Oh, is he?
Not with us anymore, unfortunately. But
No, he's not.
And yeah, quite a guy. Listen, I know exactly what you're saying. This is fine. Ty, last one, Jivan. I want to know who the toughest guy Ivan's ever seen take the field is, and I would suggest that's a long list. Maybe not. Who's the toughest guy?
There's, there's quite a few people in that category. A guy like Dan Rasovich, Dave Albright, believe it or not, Ronnie Lancaster, Kent Austin. I put a couple of quarterbacks in there. You're quite shocked at that. You'd think he'd be a linebacker or a defensive lineman. I mean, there's lots of guys that were tough, but the guys that you don't expect, like Ron Lancaster. I mean, he would. I remember when I was working with Sandy at the time. I mean, he had fractured ribs, for goodness sakes, in a game, and he continued to play. And so, I mean, and Kent was very similar. He had some real issues, and he continued to play. So, I admire those guys because they're your leaders when you think about it. And so if you have a leader that does that, that's a quarterback. People are going to pay attention as far as in the locker room is concerned. So. But there's a lot of guys, a lot of offensive linemen, defensive linemen. You have to be tough to play those positions because they take a lot of abuse. People are always constantly running at them from different angles. So, but anyways, those are my.
Yeah, Darian was pretty tough too.
Who's that?
Darian.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Darian. Yeah, he was. That was a real surprise when he tore his Achilles on. I don't know how that happened or why it happened, but there was no follow up or pardon me, there's no preamble to that one at all.
No contact.
He had no contact, never had an issue with his ankle whatsoever or his Achilles whatsoever prior to that. And one of the things I will say this about, I've gone through 14 Achilles tendon ruptures in my career, and not one of them had a precondition. In other words, Achilles tendonitis or whatever. Not one of those. And so I know a lot of people who do have Achilles tendonitis think, oh, well, it's going to tear. Not necessarily, because Laurie Skullwood had the worst Achilles tendonitis I've ever seen in an individual, and he never tore his.
Hey, last one, Ivan. I know you got to go to this golf tournament. Just on the Zach thing, I think people really want to know what you think. Is it going to ultimately be up to him? He's going to have to be the one that says his career's done, right? The team can't go to him and say you're done.
He's part of the process. There's no question. The general manager, head coach, and Zach they're going to have to discuss that one. And those are the three people that are going to have to come to some conclusion with regards to that. And I don't want to say that he's done, but I think he has to sit down and have that discussion with his family and see where he goes from there. But I don't think anybody wants to put somebody out there that's going to jeopardize their health. Mm-hmm. So, what he decides to do, I don't know.
Ivan, this has been awesome. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, so hopefully you can come back someday. Say hi to all the boys at the golf.
I will.
And enjoy the rest of summer.
I will.
All right. Ivan, Gutfriend with us, 46 years with the Riders as athletic therapist.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.